I am Becky Vorwinda. I'm the CEO of the Bronfman Fellowship, and I'm joined this evening by Rabbi Michael Rosenberg and two of our current 2022 fellows, Noah and Sophia. And I'll just ask each of them to say hello as we get started, and you'll hear from all of us throughout this evening. Michael, do you want to just kick us off and say hi?
Hi, Michael Rosenberg, zooming to you from Riverdale, New York. Nice to see many of your faces tonight.
Thanks. And then Sophia, and then Noah.
Hi, I'm Sophia Isais Day, and I am from Corvallis, Oregon.
Hey everyone, I'm Noah Friedberg from Houston, Texas.
Wonderful. And you're going to get to know them a lot more this evening and hopefully hear more from them about what Bronfman has meant for them. So first, we will be talking about the program, and hopefully we'll cover a lot of ground there. We'll hear from the folks you just met. We'll get into the application process a little bit and offer some tips, and then we'll move into the Q&A. I want to really start by just, who is a Bronfman Fellow? What is the Bronfman Fellowship? The Bronfman Fellowship was founded in 1987, so this will be our 37th cohort, and it was really founded on I'd say kind of a profound idea that the future is really in the hands of young people. The Jewish future is in the hands of young people, and identifying young people who have the potential to be community builders and deep thinkers, moral voices, cultural creators, and come from as wide a spectrum of Jewish identity as possible, and giving them space to get to know each other, to build community with each other, to really go deep intellectually and also personally, is really the way to lay the groundwork for a flourishing Jewish future and a flourishing future in general. And we're really proud of the work that we do with our North American fellows and also with our Israeli fellows. Today, we have over 1,400 alumni between our programs. And we're looking forward to telling you a little bit more about the program this evening. So, to give you a little further taste of this community, we really value diversity. When we talk about Jewish pluralism, we're talking about so many different dimensions of what makes up an individual. We're talking about different ways of relating to Jewish culture, Jewish history, Jewish practice, but we're also talking about bringing your whole selves into this community. We have fellows who come from different geographies, different economic backgrounds, different cultural and racial backgrounds, and who have different passions. This little slide, honestly, we could have made, 15 different, no, more than that, probably 100 different versions of this slide in the sense of the range of things that Bronfman alumni end up doing in the world. But this is just a little taste of some of the places that Bronfmanim bring their talents into the world. And we're so proud of how it really is for all kinds of thinkers and doers. Likewise, looking here, just a little taste of some of our younger alumni. We really see the way that Bronfman can have an impact on your life choices early in this moment, in the sense that right now our 2022 fellows are in the process of making choices about college, making choices about gap years and beyond. And the Bronfman network, the Bronfman community, is really a space that they can connect and do that. And so we really are proud of the way that Bronfmanim take this experience and make something of it for themselves. The fellowship has a number of key components. The most important intensive component is our summer seminar, which this year will be July 3rd to August 4th. And this year, the summer seminar will really offer fellows some of the direct benefits of what the pandemic years have taught us as a program. What I mean by that is that the fellowship is not only going to include 3+ weeks in Israel, but it also is going to include 10 days in North America at the outset of the summer. And fellows will have a chance to do some experiences with speakers and learning in an urban setting as well as in a retreat-based rural setting to really establish themselves as a group and as a community before moving on to their time in Israel together and also their time meeting and spending time with our Israeli fellows, which we will tell you more about shortly. The fellowship continues with, in the wintertime, we have a joint seminar with our Israeli fellows. And then in the spring, we have a closing seminar for the North American fellows. And in between all of that, there are Zoom sessions, there's lots of social connection, and our fellows will tell you more about that too, and lots of ways to keep deepening the learning between each seminar. At its core, the fellowship is really a space to explore existential questions and to use the experience of Jewish learning and Jewish community as a jumping off point for that creative exploration and that personal exploration. These are just a little taste of some of the kinds of questions that fellows have the chance to talk about and engage around. When I was a fellow in 1997, I still remember on the brochure that I sent away for in the mail and that came, in the mail to my house, it said on there, the conversations go well into the night, and that sort of clinched it for me. That said to me, like, this is a program where all the students that love to really go and explore and learn for the sake of learning get to come together and be in community with one another, and certainly that has been something that continues to be a hallmark of the fellowship. It's not just what's happening when our sessions are being run by our educational team, but it's really what's happening in the conversations and in the processing that fellows engage in together. We really value and respect diversity in so many ways, and we recognize, especially in North America, that there's a growing number of young people who are bringing different backgrounds, different identities into their Jewish life and into their Jewish experience. And we're really looking to allow fellows to self-define and to be able to share openly and recognize that their voice matters and that they're part of a community where each person's background and perspective matters. And so that is another dimension of the pluralism that we're presenting and bringing forward. I'm going to take a pause for a moment and ask Noah to share here a little bit. There's a few items that we put on this slide, but more importantly, just to offer a little bit of his own perspective as a recent fellow about some of the highlights of what the fellowship summer experience provides.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about my experience coming onto the program. I was definitely very nervous coming onto Bronfman about how I might be perceived, how I would interact with everybody, especially coming from like a more like orthodox kind of background. And when I came onto the program, I realized I didn't really have anything to fear. Something that I love about Bronfman was everybody could always speak and share their opinions, and you just had to back it up, or you didn't even have to back it up, but you had this space to explore new ideas. And for me, I always tried to like do my research, back things up, understand what I was saying, and I think it really helped me grow as a learner, as an individual, and as a Jew. And that's definitely something that I've continued to explore as I've come home. And I think that Bronfman did not necessarily give me all the answers, but it did give me the right questions to ask. And so that's definitely like a highlight of Bronfman for me.
Thanks, Noah, and we'll hear some more from you as we go, and you'll share some more stories, and that just gives a taste of sort of what stands out for you. We're going to progress through some of the slides, which will get into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of what to expect. What are some of the experiences that one has, in addition to what I hope you're already getting a sense of, which is one of the central pieces is the group itself and building friendships with, in some ways, very much like-minded individuals, and also at the same time individuals who really hold diverse viewpoints and backgrounds as well. So hold on, just trying to. Okay, so one facet of the fellowship experience is the opportunity to meet with speakers, individuals who themselves are really shaping culture, shaping politics, shaping ideas in our world today, and really getting to meet in a very intimate setting, as a cohort of 26 North American Fellows with these folks who are not just giving sort of a stump speech, but who are actually sharing something from their perspective that relates to the learning that we're doing on Bronfman overall, the questions that we're asking, these sort of big questions, and then having really space to speak to them and ask them questions and connect. So one facet is really the speakers. Noah or Sophia, if one of you wants to share maybe one speaker, not necessarily somebody that's on this slide, but that that really resonated or stuck with you, maybe that would also be helpful here.
Yeah, I can talk about Mati Friedman. So when we were actually at the context seminar, which we'll talk more about later, we had Mati Friedman come and talk about Israel and the conflict, and also a lot of like literacy as far as trying to figure out what was real and what was not on the media. And I think that his talk really just helped me with a lot of critical thinking skills and developing those kinds of skills, especially, in Bronfman when we have, one day we'll have a speaker who's completely in a different point of view than another. So I think that talk really helped me kind of narrow down finding out how to pick apart different speeches and what people are trying to tell me, and figure out what I actually think about different things instead of just letting other people feed me their own opinions.
Thank you. Another dimension of the fellowship experience is the opportunity to have hands-on art making and access to folks who themselves are involved in Jewish culture creation. So about 3 years ago now, we launched arts workshops. This does not mean that fellows need to come in as artists in any form. And when I say arts, you can see here on this slide, for example, it's pretty wide ranging, but rather that in addition to wonderful Jewish learning, and again, we'll talk more about that shortly, there's also really the value of being able to feel and connect to the creative process, whether or not you've ever thought of yourself as a creative. Everyone's creative, and so really learning with and thinking with individuals who themselves are using their full time to make art has been another thing that I think really has added to the richness of the experience. Noah, I don't remember what arts track you were in this summer, but I don't know if you could just tell us something about what that experience was like.
So I was in dance this summer, which was very interesting for me because I have no background in dance. And in my friend group, I'm known as a terrible dancer. But I decided to do that this summer to really like challenge myself and try something new. And I had like a really fascinating experience. And what I expected to be some kind of class on dance technique or performance turned into something much more and was some kind of spiritual exploration of dance itself and of how it can really help you, I guess, explore and also sort of communicate. And so I guess we had like a really cool experience, like meditating and trying to figure out how to communicate, I guess, feeling and emotion through dance. And so it was very cool. Highly recommend.
So that's good to hear, even when it's not your comfort zone. And in some ways, that's one of the nice things about these sorts of experiences. Here's just a few sort of images from different arts experiences. And now I'm going to hand it over to Rabbi Michael Rosenberg, who has served on faculty in both 2020 and in 2021, and will be joining us as a faculty member in 2023. And Michael will share a bit about, first of all, what does it mean when we say faculty members? What does it look like to be studying with rabbis and educators on the Bronfman Fellowship? And what does the learning look like a bit? And so I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Becky. Yeah, so the faculty are a group of folks with whom you'll be studying in what we call shiur, sort of an ongoing class that you sort of rotate through over the course of the summer. And formally, that's kind of the main place where you're interacting with the faculty. There are other times as well, but that's the sort of main piece formally. You're actually interacting with the faculty all the time, right? I mean, there's part of what's wonderful about the program is the chance to sort of, catch a conversation over a meal or over a walk, something that came up in class that you want to sort of follow up on. It's funny, I was thinking when thinking about how to describe Shi'ur, the sort of core piece of the program, that's sort of the formal place where faculty and fellows interact. I actually didn't say this to Becky when we were talking about this in advance, but I realized it's actually really hard to do. Like looking at the 4 faculty from last summer, the kinds of classes they each teach, think about the faculty from the summers that I've taught, are so different from each other. It's really hard to sort of say what a typical Shi'ur, one of these classes, looks like. When I'm teaching, in many ways, it looks like what you might sort of imagine as a traditional text study, right? My background is, I have a rabbinical degree, I have a PhD in ancient Jewish history, and so the kinds of classes I teach are focused on classical Jewish texts, as opposed to another class that might be focused on using art as a way to access Jewish connection, or using looking at thinking about what Judaism might look like in a very different kind of setting. And so the form even of the different shiurim, the genres, are really very different from each other. What they all share, I'm trying to think about like what is it that sort of defines a Bronfman shiur, is one, sort of a passionate desire to get deep and really sort of explore a topic and be able to ask questions and push each other in a kind way, like a way that's always supportive, but really says like, you said something hard, I want to sort of probe that more, and also in a really open way, right? That like, in my shiurim, when we're looking at classical texts, you might think that folks coming with more Jewish text background would be at an advantage. Actually, very often those folks are at a disadvantage because they sort of have a preconceived notion of what the text means, and what you have that interaction between someone who's coming with more Jewish background and someone who's coming with fresher eyes, and the person with fresher eyes might actually have a reading that opens something up for everyone else. And so that kind of openness to whether it's exploring a topic through art or exploring it through classical text or 20th century German philosophy, German Jewish philosophy, whatever it might be, what all the shiurim sort of share is, I mean, first of all, there's no this is not a class in school, right? There's no homework assignments, there's no tests, there's no grade. We're learning for the sake of learning. We're learning because what we all share is that we want to know more, we want to understand more. And then within that, the variety of what the faculty offers is just so wildly different from each other. That's really, I think, one of the greatest blessings of the program is, 1 week you'll be studying Talmud, the next week you'll be studying 19th century poetry. So I think that's really a fantastic opportunity. And, for me, I just love the chance to get to talk to students both in and out of shiur and really see how the ideas they're experiencing on Bronfman are shaping their thinking and pushing them in ways that they might not have thought of.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next slide, which is talking a little bit about Shabbat. And Michael, maybe you could say a little first, and then Sophia or Noah, if one of you wants to chime in a little, just to give some color to Shabbos.
Sure. So I have a little bit of a different experience from what the fellows on this call have had. The 2 summers I taught, one was the fully online summer of 2020 in the heart of the pandemic. And then it was 2021 when we were able to be in person, but not able to go to Israel. And so we spent our summer all together at a retreat center. And what that meant was that we were really putting Shabbos together ourselves. We'll have one opportunity like that this summer. The first Shabbos will be together at a retreat center here in North America. And that really is a chance to sort of hear from different fellows of what is your Shabbos experience like? What, if any, background do you have in experiencing a Shabbos, and how do we put together a Shabbos that allows everyone to have the kind of Shabbos experience that they need to have, and also recognize the diversity of folks we have around. It's an amazing opportunity, I think, to really sort of ask yourself, like, what is essential to my own experience of Shabbos, and how do I make sure that happens in kind of this community? And watching folks take care of each other is really one of the most beautiful pieces of this, right? Someone whose Shabbos experience might be different from someone else's, but sort of says, like, I'm going to, sort of engage in a way that really helps you have the kind of Shabbos experience that you need to have as well. I think is really a very moving piece of the program. And,
and for fellows for whom a traditional Shabbat or in general, even sort of a different experience is not part of your experience, there's also opportunities to have secular exposure on Shabbat. And so finding, this balance is something that we're always working towards. And I think what's helpful to note is that the cohort itself, the group itself, works together to identify ways to make each other feel supported in an experience like this. So there isn't a complete playbook like this is how Bronfman's going to do Shabbat every single year, because every person in each group is unique and different. And that likewise goes for the kind of learning that happens, as Michael noted. Depending on the educator team each year, there's different learning, and depending on what's happening in the world, there's different learning. Yes, we're asking timeless questions together, and we're also really responsive to what's going on that's bubbling up, that's important for all of our learners together. So Noah or Sophia, if one of you don't mind jumping in, or both of you, it's fine.
Yeah, I can speak about this. I actually had a very interesting kind of transition with Shabbat over the summer. So I came into the Bronfman experience. My family did Shabbat. We lit candles, but we didn't really keep traditional Shabbat. We rarely go to synagogue on Saturdays or Friday nights. So I came into it with like not really knowing how that other side kind of dealt with Shabbat, and it was very foreign to me and very interesting. So I came into it, and my roommate Leona, she is modern Orthodox, and so we kind of, as roommates, had to have this discussion about, okay, like, are we going to keep the light on in the bathroom? How are we going to like make everything comfortable for you? We're not going to turn on or off lights when you're in the room. That kind of conversation that had to happen. And then kind of going through the process of Bronfman, I started to become more interested in this idea of keeping a very strict Shabbat. So then I decided to try it. And for the last like 3 or 4 weeks of the fellowship, I was pretty much doing it completely, and I really enjoyed it. And that was really nice about the fellowship, is that it kind of gave me that space to explore. And that's by no means to say you have to, go more into Judaism. You can also decide to go less and kind of figure out what balance works for you and how you want to live your life.
Thanks, Sophia. I'll continue on, and we're getting towards the Q&A portion. So if people do have questions and they want to put anything into the chat, you're also welcome to do that as we're speaking, but we'll also open it up shortly. So we noted earlier that the fellowship includes an experience with our Israeli Bronfman Fellows. So the Bronfman Fellowship as a program has 2 parallel cohorts each year. So just as we're doing this info call for our North American program, we also do info calls and are in the midst of the recruitment process in Israel. So if you know anybody in Israel that's an 11th grader, please let them know about Amitei Bronfman, which is our parallel program there. And we have 2 opportunities over the course of the year for in-person time together between our Israeli and our American fellows. And part of that is also because we believe deeply in the relationship between Israeli Jews and American Jews, and the importance of understanding each other's context, each other's background, and where folks are coming from. We believe that that's part of Jewish pluralism. The identity expansiveness that we see of American Judaism offers a whole range of ways of understanding what it means to be Jewish. And once you encounter Israeli Jews, wow, you see there's a whole other and a whole growth perspective of all the ways that Jewishness can manifest in different places. So it's really a beautiful opportunity to connect. And we also have some virtual and ongoing ways that the 2 cohorts connect beyond these 2 seminars. Sophia was going to share a moment as well about the context seminar, just what it meant for you, Sophia, to interact with the Israeli fellows.
Yeah, so I actually think that the context seminar was kind of one of the more difficult parts of Bronfman, just because, as an American, I've kind of come into this space with preconceived notions about how Israeli Jews are going to kind of act and how what their attitudes are towards American Jews. And so I think it was kind of a big shifting when I realized, oh no, they don't actually think those things. In fact, the cultural things are a little bit more complex than I realized. And so I think that was just a very interesting, especially in regards to Israelis, Jews maybe thinking of American Jewry as watered down or less halachic. And so I think that was a very interesting point for me to kind of just have that shift occur.
Great, thank you. And in addition to it being a pretty challenging encounter, I think the other thing that I love about it as well, and I'm sure you would agree, is it's also very fun. Like it's very playful, even as there's intense conversations and really grappling with difficult perspectives. And that's one of the nice things about the joint seminar. So we're going to take a few minutes, and I'm so grateful to Noah and Sophia for sharing thus far, and we're going to take a few more minutes for each of them. Noah, maybe you could start to just share with us like one snapshot, a little story, just, you're already getting some of the stories from them, but another story from each of them about something that stands out to them as from their Bronfman experience. And again, keeping in mind, they're still in the midst of their Bronfman Fellowship year, because it really is an arc, and they're still making sense of the experience. But Noah, why don't you jump in?
So something that intellectually really made me struggle with, that I really have struggled with since going on Bronfman and now coming home, is a question that I've continued to explore, is something that, I came onto the program coming from an Orthodox background, coming onto the program expecting, I guess, like to see some kind of like progressive struggle with more like traditional undercurrents or beliefs that I had. And so I really wanted to explore that. And something on Bronfman that made me really sort of question that and really sort of interact with these ideas was at a Shabbat lunch, where we were having a really fascinating discussion about these kinds of questions, about the virtues of experience versus the importance of growth and the way that tradition measures growth. And so I think that since then, so I will say that at that lunch, somebody said how they had this experience with like certain prayers where they wouldn't use a book to read the prayers. They would only sort of say it by heart, and often they didn't even know the prayer. And so it came into this discussion whether it was more important to, rely on the book and sort of bring that into the experience, or to love the experience for what it is when it's always been this way for that person. And so I think it really made me like understand, like really sort of see a new perspective, how somebody's experience could be so valuable even when they didn't necessarily use like a prayer book. And so since then, I've started to think more about experience as important in addition to rules. And as a rule follower, that's very hard for me. But I think that exploration was something that Bronfman really made me open my eyes up to.
Yeah, so a really important moment in the seminar for me was when we all went camping in the Negev desert, and it was kind of getting towards nightfall, and so all the fellows were cooking and like chopping up vegetables and potatoes, and everyone was standing in front of this big like bowl of oil, and we were all frying up these potatoes, and everyone was just standing around and singing and having fun and laughing, and like we were counting down the seconds until the potatoes would be perfectly ready to take out. And so I just think that moment, like I hold it very dear to my heart, just because it was a moment where everything felt so perfect and so happy. And the people that were there with me, I love them so much. And yeah, it was just a moment of friendship for me.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, so this dual theme of encountering new ways of thinking about things, or different perspectives, and people who hold different perspectives, and at the same time building really tight relationships, and feeling at peace and feeling connected, and hopefully those things can happen simultaneously for our fellows. So I want to share a little bit about the application process, give a few words about that, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So the applications are due December 5th, and in order to apply, you need to use our online system, though on our website you can see the questions. So if you are working on your application, that will be helpful for you. At the same time, you need 2 letters of recommendation, one of which needs to be from a teacher who knows you in a classroom setting, and the other should be from any adult that knows you well, that can speak to you and your qualities. They need not know anything about your Jewish background or your Jewish identity in order to write letters for you. They should just know your character. And you also will need to submit a school transcript. So we do encourage you to make sure to get onto the online system in order to, especially to get your recommenders and your school transcript folks time so that they can get those things out. We also very soon will be sending out an email with alumni who are in college now and who are available and interested in answering any more questions you might have, or being just helpful in some way as you're in your application process. So we want to make the experience as positive of an experience as possible. We certainly recognize that this application is a rigorous application, and we are looking for people who care deeply about their communities, care deeply about the things that they choose to spend their time doing. And in some cases, that means that you're doing a whole bunch of different activities or whatever else. In some cases, it might be very specific. There might be something that you're passionate about and you spend a lot of your time on. We're looking for people who are deep thinkers, love to learn and love to get to know other people and want to be part of a community of this sort that is really based in pluralism, which means based in a space for challenging conversations and disagreement, but also openness to one another and making your heart open to other people. So please know that though we are asking, for example, for school transcripts, our focus is not grades. Our focus is really looking for deep thinkers who are ready for a challenge like this and who are excited for a challenge like this. Granted, there are 26 fellows each year in the North American cohort. And so because of that, we really work hard to find ways to connect applicants to other opportunities as well. So once you apply to the fellowship, we will also do our best to share with you. We have a range of other programs and organizations that that we are in touch with who are excited to get to know people who've chosen to apply to the Bronfman Fellowship. And we try and make those connections. And we also are happy at the end of the process to provide some feedback or support for folks as they go through the process. So I often hear from students who say that this was a great sort of starting point for them in the college application process as well. But I really don't want to take for granted that it does take time to put the application together, and we are just so grateful to you for putting yourself out there and wanting to participate in this kind of experience. So now, thank you, first of all, for really listening and taking in this first dimension of what we're sharing. But I often have found with these info sessions, the most fun is when we get into the Q&A. So I'm actually going to stop sharing the slides because now it's really just to get into hearing from you. So if you would like to ask a question, you can use the raise hand function, or you can put into the chat either I have a question and then unmute and we'll call on you, or just type your question and we'll read it out loud. We also have an alum from 2020, Leah Shvedova, who's on, and she's also helping us with the Zoom tonight, so she can also be a resource. And so Leah, feel free if you see hands or other things, you can also say it so that I know who to pull up. I do see Rowan over here, so I'll start with you.
I just wanted to ask something about the application. For the question where it's asking you to talk about the 3 pieces of media that have like inspired you, that like you've connected with deeply, that you've learned a lot from, is that 250 words for each piece of media or for all of them together? I want to make sure that I'm not writing way too much or way too little.
Yep. It's for all of them together. So so it's not super long. It doesn't need to be super long. And yeah, it's actually that question, though it's like slightly been adjusted over the years is one of the questions that has been on our application in some form since 1987. And it's somebody needs to do research on it one day and like actually say, what have 17-year-olds thought was interesting and influential for them, culturally or reading, et cetera, because it would be such a fun thing to look back at, but hope that helps.
Definitely.
Okay. Rami.
Hi. First of all, thanks for hosting this session. I was wondering if there's any exposure to Israeli politics or like Israeli-Palestinian relationships, and if you could speak a little more onto like what that's like at the fellowship.
Absolutely. I'll say one thing and then Noah or Sophia, if either of you want to jump in on that. So we do recognize we sort of have sometimes, I would say, a little bit of a struggle, which is that the fellowship is trying to accomplish a lot of things in a relatively short period of time. And so we recognize that we are not going to be able to cover everything about Israel and to really do it justice in the short period that we have. Nonetheless, it's certainly important that we have the chance to explore a little bit, at least, about Israeli politics and about Israel as a state, and also to understand the history of Zionism and to connect to that set of questions, and also to encounter Israelis who live over the Green Line, as well as to encounter Palestinians. So we try and do a little of all of that through speakers and also through the conversations with our Israeli fellows. And at the same time, I really strongly feel like the hope is that then fellows will choose to go back to Israel and spend more time to really do that space and that place much more justice than the short window that we have. But again, Noah or Sophia, I'd love for you to say what it was like for you.
Yeah, I would say a lot like Becky said, it's definitely not the main focus of the program, but it's very present. And especially when we go on the Mifkash where we meet the Israeli fellows, it's something that you find is a real important topic because it's about how they see Americans, about how we see Israelis, and we do talk about it and we do have speakers. So you definitely get to have that exposure, and I think that'll definitely open up a lot. I think Bronfman will open up a lot for you to learn more about Israeli politics, just because you really get to hear like a really diverse set of views. And like this past summer, we had Mati Friedman come speak to us, who's that author who was mentioned earlier. And he definitely says some very interesting, controversial things about Israeli politics and Israel. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Leah Factorman.
Hi, I just wanted to say this program sounds amazing, and I'm so excited to really get through this interview process and application process. I had a question for the fellows. Having just come back from this amazing tour in Israel where you learned so much, how are you seeing like changes in your life? How are you thinking differently, and like how has it really impacted you? And where are you looking forward to go next?
Sophia?
Yeah. Well, that's a very loaded question because I'm still, processing everything that happened. But I think definitely the first like 2 months after coming back, it was definitely extremely present in my life, just because I feel like fundamentally I had kind of changed just in how I viewed the world and how I thought about things. I definitely like any sort of media. I was a lot more like aware of any sort of media I was consuming and kind of how that was affecting my brain. And I think I also just realized how much it is important for me to like get a lot of intellectual stimulation by reading like interesting books and different things, which was prevalent before, but definitely a lot more prevalent after Bronfman. I also think that like the relationships that I've had through Bronfman have really stayed with me the past few months after. Like me and my roommates, we have a group chat and we talk in it regularly, and me and Noah FaceTime for like an hour every week. And they really helped me like go through all my problems in a very mature and understanding way, just because of Bronfman's shared experience really helped us really understand things at a different level.
Noah, did you want to add or
Yeah, I would definitely agree. For me, it's definitely brought up a lot of new questions and made me a much better learner and made me much more studious. I would say that it made me realize how interested I was in the humanities, and I'm even thinking about changing my major from business to something else because of this. Like that's how it's been very, very impactful. So yeah.
Great. And also since we have Leah, who's a little bit past her fellowship year now, she can answer that great question as well.
Yeah, so for context, I'm a sophomore in college right now at Williams. And I will say that before Bronfman, I wasn't necessarily super religious, much more of a like just Jewish secular person. And now I don't use my phone on Shabbat, which is pretty rare here at Williams. And it's like allowed me to be much more connected to my peers. I'm focused much more on listening and connecting to others than I was prior to Bronfman. And I had always been very much a STEM person. And like Noah said, I am a math major, but I'm also adding a religion major. Yeah, so that's been really interesting, and I'm generally much more spiritual. I like to spend much more time outside than I think I did previous to Bronfman. But I did do Bronfman on Zoom, so I think a little bit different, but still nonetheless has like affected my life 2 years down the road, and I'm very excited for an alumni event, which is coming in what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I don't know. Yeah.
Thanks, Leah. Okay, Alexander, I see your hand.
Hi, I have a question for the fellows, and it is how does Bronfman prepare you to wrestle with these deep questions in the future, like when you come home? Because I know you were talking a lot about how you're talking about these deep things in the fellowship, but really, how does it prepare you to wrestle with them on your own?
I think that a big part of it is understanding that you can wrestle with questions without getting a definitive answer. And I think that before Bronfman, I very much thought, oh, I need to have an answer about these things now. And I think afterward, it's like there's a process to everything. And, one question is going to open up like 1,000 different questions. And it's okay to not have a complete answer all the time. I also think that it just kind of opened up more compassion and allowing to have space to wrestle with those questions and not being so hard on yourself. Yeah, about knowing everything all the time.
I also want to just say, and this I guess just shows the lovely, beautiful relationships on Bronfman, is that I do see two other people from Noah and Sophia's cohort that are on this call. So Sam and Isa, if either of you do want to answer any questions, you are super welcome to add some voices in at this point. It's so great to get these questions. I'm gonna call in someone else, and I see Miriam has her hand up. Miriam, my oldest daughter, is named Miriam.
Hi. I guess my question is comparing the first week when you arrived, when you met everyone, when it was kind of still a lot of unknowns, to the last week when you were getting ready to leave and you had this whole summer experience. How did your attitude and your attitude about what you learned, but also your attitude about kind of hearing about what the other fellows had learned and their points of view, how did those two feelings kind of manifest between the first and the last week?
I think that like for me, my experience with other people became more positive as time went on. Like before, as I got to know them more and more, I learned more and more about them, and my perspective on everybody and everybody's like opinions and backgrounds became more and more positive as I really got to like interact with their ideas, and sort of compare them to my own and also sort of let my own evolve in some way. And so I think that I guess I just sort of learned more and more. And I think that one of the great things about Bronfman is you're able to really like interact with different ideas in like a very positive and non-judgmental way. And so, yeah, I think that was a very like good part of it.
Great. Sam, I see your hand up. Sam Zanbilowitz.
Oh, hi there. I was just curious about how, as alumni, your perception of the actual Bronfman changed from before you participated in it until after.
Great. Actually, maybe Leah, do you want to grab this one?
Yeah. I think something that is really underestimated. So I guess I kind of applied to Bronfman on a whim, and something that's really underestimated for me was the community. Like we have a listserv that I like to keep on top of, and I will say that anytime I've sent anything back into the listserv, I have come back to like a wave of responses from like all sorts of different things, all sorts of different people offering advice, offering help, offering, anything. I even was thinking of planning a road trip with the goal of having my stops be Bronfman homestays, because I was pretty positive that if I put out into the listserv, hey, is anybody gonna let me sleep in their house tonight? Like, they would say yes. So I think the community is really fantastic, both in your cohort and outside of the cohort. And it's just this really lovely group of people that all really love to learn from each other and listen to one another. No matter where you're coming from, no matter where you're going, people want to help, want to listen, want to learn. And I think that's pretty much. And I didn't really know that at all coming in. So yeah, that's been my impression.
Sophia, I wonder if you also want to share. Earlier, before this call started, we were chatting and you were talking a bit about sort of, I guess, the imposter syndrome challenges, and that sort of hits me as maybe relevant here too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think before you start the fellowship, you're reading through all of these people's bios and you're like, oh my gosh, everyone looks so successful, everything looks so incredible. And then definitely like the first week, you're learning about all these new people and they just, they seem really successful and incredible. And I think that's difficult because you don't feel like you necessarily belong in this group of people and you really don't feel like you have much to bring to the table. And that's a thing that a lot of people in my cohort talked about. And then I think as the weeks progress, you kind of, there's like this sweet spot in the middle where you kind of settle in and you're like, oh, this is, I'm meant to be here. This is my group of people. This is, a home for me. And I think that's a really lovely thing that happens.
Great, thank you. Noga, do you want to ask your question?
Of course. Hi, I'm Noga. And I actually have two questions. So one of them is, how do you select the faculty to ensure that they represent a broad spectrum of all the Jewish experiences from the diversity of Jews? And my second question is, as someone who grew up in Canada, I wonder what the balance of like Canadians and American Jews, what the balance is, and the different experiences, and how the Canadian Jewish experience is reflected.
These are such good questions. I'll say a tiny bit, and also maybe Michael can add to this. So the first question about our faculty team, we definitely recognize that with usually about 5 educators on the faculty team, we are not reflective of all facets of Jewish background and identity. But one of the things that we do try and prioritize is having, first of all, educators who hold different relationships to Jewish practice and tradition and come from different cultural perspectives, but also people who hold different Jewish texts as sort of valuable to them. And what I mean by that is that some of our faculty, and Michael mentioned this, maybe are really into philosophy or really into Kafka or really into certain poets. And some of our faculty are into the mashup between, Tanakh, the Torah, and how that interplays with, I don't know, comedy shows. Like, there's just so many different ways to think about it. But what we are looking for when we look for educators is really a few things. One of which is great teachers, people who love ideas, love to listen, love to connect and bring conversation into the mix when they are studying with fellows. People who really are deep scholars in the spaces that they're engaging with the text that they're engaging with. And then people who are great mentors, are caring, are interested in our students and love working with young people, even though a lot of our faculty don't in their day jobs work with young people all the time, but see the value of, what I can say personally is I love this age. I love working with young people because the questions that are on your mind are real and matter because you're about to do important things in the world and you're already doing important things in the world. And our educators really understand that. So Micha, I'll let you add to that, and then I'll say something about the Canadian experience.
Sure. I'll just say also, as someone who's married to a Canadian, I hear what you're saying about the Canadian American thing. It is real, that distinction. In terms of the diversity, exactly what Becky said. Of course, 5 educators are not going to represent the diversity of Jewish people. And I'm just thinking of a time I was teaching a class for a spring seminar, I think, about the Afikomen. And all of my sources were sort of classical sources of the Talmud and medieval commentators sort of getting into this technical question of, the simple question of like, what do we actually accomplish when we eat the Afikomen, that matzah at the end of the Seder? And I showed it to one of my colleagues from the Bronfman faculty, and he said, oh, there's this great poem by this Jewish-born Christian poet that I think really intersects with the Tosfos here. And I was like, a little skeptical, and he showed it to me, and I'm not into poetry, that's not my bag. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this poem is directly in conversation with this Tosfos, with this medieval commentary on the Talmud. The same thing that's happening with the fellows, of that sort of dynamic interaction, happens among the faculty also, because we are coming from places, different educational places, the dynamism of the program.
Sorry, all my internet was bad in the space I was in, so I'm moving rooms. I apologize. I think, Noga, I want to be really frank and say that it is true that the Canadian Jewish experience is different than the American Jewish experience. The North Americans' experience is different from the Israeli experience, but then there's still distinctiveness between the two. And though we've been aware of this and have tried certainly to have at least 1 or 2 speakers who also can bring a Canadian Jewish lens. I think it's like a common lament, I will say, amongst our Bronfman Fellows who are Canadian, that at times it does feel that there isn't enough room for them to explore that additional difference in their experience. And so part of that is because often there's 1 or 2 Canadian fellows in the cohort, and the content of the program takes place in Israel and in the US, but not in Canada. Nonetheless, we love our Canadians and really would love to have Canadian applicants and always feel that they bring value, but it can sometimes feel a little lonely. Okay, so I think that I see Rowan has a question, and if there's any others, and also parents, you are certainly welcome. We're so glad to have you on this call, and you are welcome to ask a question as well if there's anything that we can answer. We do see the relationship and partnership with families and with parents is really important to this process, and we try and really share as much as we can about what's happening on the fellowship, and staying connected to families is very important. Okay, Rowan, go for it.
So I had a question just about when you're on the fellowship, like in Israel, is there a lot of like discussion, like not just like about politics with different demographics in Israel and the West Bank, but is there a lot of like cultural and interfaith discussion? Because I know that Israel has a pretty significant Muslim and Christian population. I'm just wondering if there's any like dialogue specifically about that.
There is some, certainly it depends on the year and different experiences that we have for the program, but we certainly recognize and try and make space to see that Israel has many peoples living there, and so there is some. Trying to think though, I wonder if anyone else on the call wants to respond to that of our fellows who are on the call.
I think that the majority of conversations about like faith are definitely more geared towards like inter-observances. So there's a lot of discussion about kind of more secular Jews versus more Orthodox Jews. And I think that that is definitely very prevalent, especially among the fellows who come from such a diverse background. And I also think that there is some discussion on different faiths, especially in East Jerusalem when we went there and talked with Palestinians. There was also some of that conversation. So yeah.
I know in my year we had a lot of conversations about interfaith and a lot of conversations about mixing faiths because we had a couple of people from interfaith backgrounds, and that was very fruitful. As it ties to Israeli culture, I can't say very much, but I will say that we did have plenty of conversations about interfaith.
Thank you. So I see a few questions in the chat, and then Jacob, I see your hand as well, so we'll make sure to get to you as we're just wrapping up. The seminars that are in North America tend to be different every year, but usually sort of somewhere in New York or near Washington, D.C. It typically is sort of on the Eastern Seaboard is where those seminars take place. The makeup of the cohort and sort of the makeup of religious observance, it's a really interesting question because there isn't an exact playbook for us, but I would say that probably a third of the cohort, maybe sometimes even a little bit more than that, is engaged in regular Jewish practice, either defines themselves as Orthodox or is connected in some way to halachic observances or communities where that's a focus for them. And then 2/3, it's a wider range. I think that fellows who come from very limited Jewish learning backgrounds maybe are about a third of the cohort. And I think just really want to emphasize, and then again, really happy for any of the fellows that are on this call to add to this. But as Michael noted, each fellow brings their world of knowledge into this experience and into this space. And we really do value all the different exposures and experiences that people are bringing, not only their Jewish experiences, by the way, but, all the things that make up who you are. And so the makeup shifts depending on each year, but always has some mix in that way. Jacob, I'll open it up to you, and then I see one other question here, and then we'll say thanks to everyone.
So I have two questions. One, how many kids typically apply to the fellowship?
It really does range. I would say on average, in an average year, it's a little over 200 applications. However, the pandemic has kind of put a lot of curveballs for all of us, including, not necessarily as easy to predict what our numbers will be. I think last year we saw that a lot of students who had delayed summer opportunities had like a plethora of opportunities. And so it shifted some of the ways that our application pool looked, and to be determined what this year will be. Feel free to ask your other question, Jacob.
I think I'm cutting out. I didn't get the last part. Could you repeat that?
Just saying, like somewhere around 200 is sort of typical for us, give or take. Okay. Jacob, I don't know if there's a challenge for you. You're welcome to write it into the chat also if you have another question, but I see also the faculty and curriculum topics decided for each year. Do they vary greatly from year to year? So that's a great question. The faculty team, we will confirm our team sometime by December, sometimes earlier, sometimes not, really depends each year. And usually it's a mix of educators who've worked with us in the past, as well as we're always sort of bringing new educators into our pedagogy and methodologies as well. The curriculum, it's an interesting one. On one hand, we don't have like a set curriculum, and on the other hand, we do have a set curriculum. What I mean by that is that there are some key themes that we really explore together over the course of the fellowship, topics around identity, language, self and other, vision. These are some of the themes that we try and explore, and there are certain texts that we try and use each year, but at the same time, we really want to draw on the richness and just brilliance of the team of educators that we get to work with. And so there is variability in what the learning looks like based on who the team is each year. Okay. All right. How much time is spent exploring parts of Israel during the program? Good question. So the fellowship is definitely not a travel program. And what I mean by that is that when you get to Israel, you will be based in Jerusalem. There will be, as Sophia noted, there will be at least an overnight camping trip in the Negev in the south, which is beautiful. There will definitely be day trips, time to sort of see Tel Aviv, time to get to know a little bit up north. There will be some time with our Israeli fellows, and that's usually at a third location, so not, or a second location rather, not in Jerusalem. But we are mostly really in a space together, and what you will definitely explore most is probably Jerusalem of all of the parts of Israel. And yeah, you get a taste, but it's, again, definitely something that I would encourage anyone who attends the program to go back to Israel if they haven't had time to do more exploring. And likewise, if you've spent a lot of time in Israel, I can tell you for sure that you will not feel as though, wow, I've done all this already. This is a really different kind of way of experiencing Israel. All right, well, this has been wonderful. We are so appreciative of your time. We're very much here to be helpful to you in whatever way that may look. Sari, who is on the call, is our administrative director, is really able to answer your questions about the fellowship as well. We are happy to put you in touch with alumni if you have more questions, with the awesome fellows who joined us this evening, with faculty members. Thank you so much, Rabbi Michael. And we really look forward to your application and look forward to staying in touch with you as we can. And if you do have a question that you wanted to stay on, we're happy to stay on for a few minutes. But we know that it's a busy weeknight and you're all busy juniors. So thank you for making the time this evening. And I'm going to stop the recording.